We are going to be kickstarting your design masterclass, and we have two veterans from Onething Design Studio. I'm going to be quickly introducing them to you for this particular design masterclass. Onething Design Studio, of course, is trying to revolutionize the way humans and machines interact, as they say. And what is really interesting is on the website, they say, no, it's not a typo. It's actually one thing together that they're talking about. They are, of course, looking at user experience design, and that's essentially what you're going to be learning through the course of this masterclass. Introducing the two speakers over here, we've got Venky and Antara joining us. Venky Hariharan, one of your masters also for the Design MasterCamp. He is a human-centered designer. He talks occasionally about UX design, UX research, product design, user experiences. He's a design manager and has been working with Onething Design Studio for over 5 years now. Was an engineer, post that went on to New York University, did a master's degree, and that's how he introduces himself, that back 8 years ago with that New York University experience, he thought that there was a lot of scope here in the country as well. And ever since then, of course, making sure that the journey is there to build cool products, as he says, has closely worked with organizations like ITC, Hindustan Times, Noise, to build exceptional experiences for the end users. And there are millions and billions of them. Correct me if you want to, Venky, when you'll go ahead with your introduction. And yet another veteran as well joining us, Antara. Antara, again, equally illustrious career over here when we're looking at, she's also been associated, she's been the lead designer with Onething Design Studio. Of course, she's the user experience lead. And when we are looking at her credentials as well, has graduated from Georgia Institute of Technology. One more thing, she's an experienced UI UX designer. She's having this great history of working with the design industry, particularly skilled when it comes to branding, identity, illustration, and of course, the strong arts and design professional. She is a strong arts design professional with a bachelor's that she's having in design focused learning. So two veterans largely coming, making sure that they'll enable you to understand core principles, understand the basic nuances of design, and to create that brilliant user experience. As they say, they have been creating these exceptional experiences for umpteen number of users. I'll let Antara, Venky, both of you spearhead the conversation. Over to both of you to take this masterclass forward. Really looking forward to the masterclass.
Thank you for the great introductions.
Yeah, it was a lovely introduction. Thank you so much. So Antara here is actually going to take this forward for the next 20 odd minutes. Correct me if I'm wrong, Antara. But before that, we'll just sort of outline the objective of what we are doing today. So obviously, Antara and I, being UX designers, we believe in research. Like, that is one of the core principles of design, research, and how that helps businesses provides businesses with insights that are tangible and insights that are measurable, right, and actually help the product scale better. So Antara here is going to now share her screen once I'm done, and she's actually going to just take you through some core research principles that we follow here, along with how we've applied them to the real life products we build here and how that has helped the businesses. So Antara, anytime you want, you're ready.
All right. Okay. Hope you guys are doing well. You can't reply to me. I'm just going to assume that's the case. But I'm Antara. Of course, you got to know that I'm the experience lead at Onething right now. And I have been designing products for over 5 years. But this is my very first masterclass. I'm very excited, you guys. Hope it goes really well. I will present my screen and walk you through what we have for us today. Before we start, I think, of course, this entire discussion is about user research and insights and how it really helps an organization. I know it sounds a little dry, but it's a theoretical topic and you guys have got to participate, because at the end of this entire presentation, I've got a very interesting case study that we'll go through, which is going to be much, much more visual. So let's start with a product before we actually dive into digital interfaces, right? So you can see this good looking, cute mug. Somebody designed it. I think it looks nice. But when we actually get deep into it, we see that it's not very convenient at all. And I know it's just a meme off the net, but it conveys the point across, right? Because probably all of you guys are right out of college or in college. You've landed maybe your first project, you have tried your hand on some freelance project, and the client comes up to you and says, all right, I want a website revamped and I want to do a really good job there, have a brilliant experience. But the only thing they don't have is time and money, which is the case for almost every freelance project ever, since the time at least I was out. Now, at this point, I think as designers, as UX and UI professionals, we have to tell them that designing is more than just designing screens. It all starts with knowing the user, right? Who they are, what do they want, what are their pain points, and how can we help them out? If this person who designed the mug could have done that, we would not have been in such a painful situation here. So when we talk about user experience and user research per se, when do we start? Typically, it starts at the very beginning of the project, right? So we start with getting data, we start with getting feedback. You observe your target users, you try and get to know their needs, their behaviors, their pain points in relation to the product that you're designing. But it doesn't just stop at the very beginning. It is an iterative cycle. So if you see here, right from user research to user experience design, you keep on coming back through the entire loop of feedback. You build and you iterate to keep on improving the product as and when and upgrade continuously. So there are two kinds of user research. One we get into is qualitative, which of course, as per the name, is more on the lines of descriptive content, right? So we describe the opinions, we sort of outline the reasons, the motivations, the pain points of the users, whereas quantitative, on the other hand, is more to do with numerical data, right? It is data that can be analyzed, it can be interpreted, and then we can derive insights out of it. It's more of a statistical look at what all we've gathered so far on the opinions and behaviors of the existing users. Moving on, what we have here is it looks a little hectic right now, but it's a very simple visual interpretation of the different kinds of user research that we have, from qualitative to quantitative. There's also behavioral and attitudinal, and the difference between that is what people do versus what they actually say. Now, people might say that I want to have a product listing page with everything visible as clearly as possible. I don't want any of the paraphernalia around it. But what they end up doing is they end up picking on categories because it makes it easier for them to look at information. The difference between understanding this is that we need to give the users what they need rather than what they want. Now, in this entire thing, I'm just going to go over a couple of these individual tools and activities that you conduct. We'll start from qualitative and I'll outline what these are in a line or two before we move ahead. And we can get into the detail of it later, of course, when we have our Q&A session. So starting with qualitative research, there is something called guerrilla testing, which is really super fast, super easy. You write down and you draw a couple of prototypes on paper and you go and test them out in the market. That is a super fast way of gathering user research without actually spending a lot of money and time on it. There are, of course, interviews, which you guys might have probably done, which are more one-on-one and outlined. So there are a set of questions that you would ask the user and they respond by giving their feelings and their thoughts on what they think the product is trying to achieve and how they think they've felt the entire journey of interacting with the product. There are also user focus groups. This is very interesting. We did that for one of our clients where we had to create an app for kids and their development. And we got a lot of mothers in together to sort of get their input on what they actually need. These focus groups are more group-led discussions and their activities. So you try and gather data on whatever the objective of the entire focus group discussion is, and you try and involve that into your entire iterative process. There are also field studies, which are just you go into the environment and you check out, how the people are responding. You can take photographs, you can take notes or videos. That also helps. There is something called in-lab testing, where you get user and you ask them to complete a set of specific tasks. And you see how that goes. And what they have to do is they have to talk out loud. They have to explain what they thought, where they're clicking, why they're doing that. If there are points of contention and there are questions, you raise those out. So you're trying to see throughout this entire process how a user is interacting with the product or the prototype that you have created. And all of this gives you descriptive content on that. On the other side of the spectrum is quantitative, which is, numerical. where you have user surveys. You might have, looked at Google Forms where you get huge chunks of data because it's just so structured well in a yes or no or a multiple answer question that you can actually get a lot more information and take decisions, I would say, much more faster. Now, these qualitative and quantitative are not standalone topics. You got to mix and combine both of them to come up with tangible insights. There are, just to run over a couple of others here, there's something called 5-second or the first click testing, where you actually see what the user is clicking on when they have to complete a particular task. A very expensive another tool is called eye tracking, which I have never done. I don't know, Venky, if you have, but it's super expensive when you actually see the gaze of the user, what they're looking at. Sorry?
It's a lot of fun. Eye tracking is a lot of fun, dude.
Yeah. I want to try it once. I've never gotten around to it. But you actually see how they respond, where they're looking, what are the clicks that they are intending to sort of do. It's another, like a slightly less expensive version of that is heat mapping, right? Where we've got tools like Hotjar. We've got tools like a couple of others, Crazy Egg, where you see what the entire process is. What are the page views? What are the points where the user is actually stopping? Where are they clicking? So all of this gives us so much of data that the entire idea of it is to be able to take informed decisions. That's what the entire user research is all about. You got to take a decision and come up with a strategy so that you can solve the problem of the user. A/B testing also, one option versus the other option, helps us to understand as designers. Sometimes we think something might really work well, but we're not really the users, right? So how do we validate these? How do we find patterns? How do we find a combination that sort of works in addressing the problem and creating a product with a great experience? So these are a few. Of course, there are a lot more, and there are multiple kinds and activities that you can do for user research. But some of them are relatively sort of, when you don't have enough content or you don't have enough research, that's when you got to deal with all of these. A lot of times now, because there are products and they have a digital presence, we get a lot more information. So something like user reviews and ratings are actually very efficient. If I go to an app and actually I see how the reviews have been, that really decides whether or not I'm going to download it or whether or not I'm going to use it or interact with it. There are customer support logs where users have actually put in like all of their grievances. They've written down what does not work. So understanding all of this data really helps in outlining our next steps in the way that we proceed with design. Now, the thing is that, it might seem like a lot. You don't have to do all of these research at any point, but some research is better than no research always. So, decide what works best for the kind of project that you have, the timelines, the kind of client, and create a structure and a mix of these different tools to give you the output that is going to really help you design the next steps. All right, spoken a lot. Coming to impact. Now, we've dealt with a lot of these user experience tools, but when we come to impact, how do we outline that? Is it based on, ROI? Is it based on the conversion? Is it just the fact that, my product has a great experience, or the fact that there are just no errors on it? It is a very intangible thing when it comes to impact. There are certain metrics that really help us to put together if we've really made a difference by redesigning or, product strategy or product development on the app, some of which I'm going to walk you through. So there's something called AARRR, which is not a Rajamouli movie. It is a pretty interesting metric which you can use across any product that you have. So it's called acquisition, activation, retention, referral, and revenue. What I've done here is that there are going to be a set of, say, 5 different projects. I'm going to show you one screen and tell you exactly what are certain tools that might help you in actually working around with any one of these. It eventually, if you zoom out a little bit, whatever you do, whatever improvement you make on the app is going to affect all 4, 5 of these metrics. But there are certain things that we need to keep in mind when we're redesigning or designing from scratch any product or any website. So let's start with the first one. The first is acquisition. Now, this is one project that we worked on. It's called Neta. It's an entire political stock trading platform. The idea of acquisition is that it is the amount of, the traffic you attract to your website or you attract to your app. So this traffic essentially converts your first-time users into potential customers. They need to be able to understand what the problems are. What is this app trying to do? So whenever you go to an app store and you actually see those snippets that are there, it gives you an idea whether or not it's the right fit. right? And you can do that by having a great onboarding experience. You can do that by actually outlining and brand communication and marketing. And look, keeping that in mind, keeping this lens of the fact that, acquisition of new customers is as important as retaining customers, we can design better products which are much more easier to understand and get to the point. Then we come to activation. Activation essentially means that it is the number of your first time users that perform key actions on the entire website. So it's not just about the fact that have created an app and it has all of these advanced features. You also have to look at a first time user when they do land onto your particular application or website. Are they able to reach the objective as easy as possible? Have you made the learning curve? Have you reduced it as much so that they get easy access to what they want to achieve? And through that, you get, of course, you help to identify and address all of these points of friction. Once you do that, you've created a good product. You create a product that will last and will ensure that, it's performing well, and you can increase the life cycle of it. This was one project, which is Oryx, which was a leasing platform that we created. And there were multiple different user kinds, from a coordinator to a retailer to a dealer. And we had to create something that would suffice for all of these user segments without them getting confused what is for what, right? So we try to do that. I can't, of course, get into like the details because of the time crunch that we have, but it's just one of the screens that we create for the coordinator dashboard, so that they get an idea of what information they need to see at the first glimpse, and then you deep dive in and give them advanced features. The third is something which is our third point was retention. So retention means referring to the number of first-time users that come back onto our platform, onto the website or app. And you need to identify and solve these problems so that they keep on coming back. It's not just about using your platform for a singular time. It's about increasing the lifespan and reusing it again and again. And that means that we have to really address the core problem. This was another website, was a dashboard that we created for a renewable energy asset management company. And the idea was that, how can we give them all of these extremely complicated reports, but in a manner that it becomes easy to understand. It becomes easy to, use, and also something that none of the competitors are doing, so that we can ensure for retention that, once we've created that, we know that we're able to solve that problem efficiently, and we can keep on upgrading and upscaling through user testing and making that platform even better. So again, at the end of the day, all of these tools, they end up maximizing revenue, which is, of course, our end goal, along with providing a great experience. The next one is an EV charging platform. Through this, I'm going to talk about referral, which is the number of new users that you acquire based on the previous users that you already have. And one of the most interesting things about like doing a really good design or designing a product is the fact that you can have less focus on outbound sales, right? You don't need to go and market your product if it's doing super well in the market itself. This we created for an EV charging platform. And the idea is that whenever you create a product, of course, there are other mechanisms. There are 100 different referral tools right now. You send it to your friend, you get some money back. But the idea is that I need to be able to create such a delightful experience for the customers that they not only want to come back, but they actually want to talk about this to the rest of their friends. Another example was like, I just recently started using Hopper. And that was only because one of my friends told me they got a really great deal and everything is, super efficient and effective there. But I had no idea. I haven't seen any marketing around that. So it really helps if you keep these lens in mind whenever you're designing something. The last part is this is a university design for a university platform. And the idea here is when we're looking at revenue, right? A lot of times revenue, of course, is the ultimate goal. You can reach this by converting your visitors into potential leads. And a lot of platforms focus a lot on lead generation. So we have to be very clear on how can we address that. Say for this particular university, the idea was that we need to push the people to go and apply now or register now or interact with the content so they get very enthusiastic and interested about what exactly are the offerings. And with each of these, the idea is that you have to make this into a profitable business. A lot of it has to do, of course, with your business model, but there's a huge onus that comes in when you know what you have to, deliver to the customer, and the way that you present it in your designs and the way that you develop the product when it goes live. So these are a couple of 5 things that might help you outline how does user research even impact When we spoke to students, they said that a lot of times it's really confusing. I do not get the information I want, and it's just all over. And it feels like the university is doing me a favor by telling me what they offer, right? So it has to be very, very easy to access. And when you listen there, when you know what they want and what they need to sort of reach their final objective, it makes the entire process a very linear flow. Of course, it does a couple of other things. The fact that it reduces your development cost. You haven't gone head on into developing the product. Later on, you realize there's so many bugs and problems, you got to go from scratch. So at the bare minimum, it reduces your development cost, but there are high stakes because you have to deal with the brand image. You have to deal with the perception this is a good product, and you can't make that mistake when you're sort of going big. Like I said, it also helps with less support. You end up having a less extensive support team because it makes it very easy to solve problems. You anticipate the needs and what the issues could be beforehand, so that the onus on the support team and the pressure there is sort of lesser. It makes for smoother sales. Like I said, you can market. If the product is good, it markets itself, right? So while there is marketing, they go hand in hand. One is dependent on the other, but can help the product by itself also. By doing all of these, it of course makes for a better experience, which we're all aiming for. And it gives the product a competitive edge, because we might think that every product out there does a lot of user research. A lot of people sort of, shy away from it and just dive into actually making edits on the entire life site. So these are important things, things that actually help with creating an impact, that actually make us sort of build better products. This was majority of the presentation. Now I come to the interesting part where we discuss any one case study. I'm going to take noise here because we just worked on that recently. And I can show you a couple of research tools that we used. We'll talk about, what the research looks like, because a lot of times maybe you might have seen on Medium, there are case studies which just outline sort of gist and bits of it. But I'll just show you the stuff that we created for noise. Why it's interesting is because sometimes, especially with kids, right, there are two user kinds. One is, of course, the users, and the second are the people that are buying. That means the parents. So how do you do user research in this particular category? Where is this differentiation? How do you outline who you are catering to first? All of that sort of comes in. So what we did for noise was we started off with a comparative analysis. Now, a comparative analysis essentially is looking at all the competitors in the market, outlining what they're doing right, what they're doing wrong, what are their offerings. And of course, I'll be brief with all of this, but you can get an idea of what the research looks like. So we took about 6 of the competitors. Now, before I do this also, let me tell you what Noise came to us with. So Noise came to us and they said that we want to design a kid's smartwatch. And we know that this is a market that hasn't yet been, completely cracked in India. It's not there yet, and we have a product in mind. We have a few features in mind, but we want to go right from scratch, where we want to develop the product. We want to think about strategy. We want to think about marketing. We want to, outline what these user flows are. And we have absolutely no research on kids at all. So we've never spoken to them. We know that we want to tap into this market, but we're going to be coming to you from scratch. The thing that we started off, like I said, was comparative analysis. Now with this, what we did was, and I'll just walk you through any one of them to give you an idea, was that we looked at product features and positioning. What are they communicating to the buyers? Are they talking about, their features? Are they talking about the functionality? Exactly how are they marketing their products? And what are the features that actually stand out the most? Then we looked at certain USPs, where we looked at, maybe Fitbit had something called Goal Celebration, where they had these really nice avatars that nobody else was doing. And that really sets it apart from the rest. And each of them had something different to offer. We looked at the product also, because, it's not just about designing the screen, but the entire product. So we looked at the color, we looked at the band styles, we looked at watch faces, and outlined what the market norm has been. We looked at the layout and the customization. Exactly what are the 100 different kinds of customization options that were being provided to the kids to actually play around with. The micro interactions and the gestures. Were we going to follow what has been followed so far? Are we going to try and introduce something new? And if we do that, what would be the repercussions of it? And then we did, of course, a little bit more user research, where we actually went out and we looked at all of these app logs and these ratings to outline what were the things that were really going wrong. If somebody got a 4.6, why did they get a 4.6 versus somebody who got a 2 rating, when the product clearly, as designers to us, seemed to work much, much better? So we looked at all of these, of course, key metrics, we looked at these information to come up with certain insights that would help us in positioning the noise watch that we were designing, and also looking at what were the things that we could avoid. So learn from the mistakes of these other competitors and see if we can not repeat those. We then went and conducted user interviews. Now, it was obviously all of this was remote, where we spoke to kids of different age groups. We were looking at a target age group of 6 to 12, and we outlined each of these. So we created an entire format where we had a set of questions that we were going to ask them. It was more of a one-on-one thing where each of them would go over and answer these questions, and we would move ahead and answer their questions. What it did was it gave us a lot of descriptive data. Now, this is qualitative data I was talking about, right, in the beginning of the presentation. And it helped us outline what do these kids want versus what do they actually need in a smartwatch. We also created an entire visual study because we had no research at all. So we created and we wanted to see, what were the kind of fonts that they were resonating with. Are there specific watch faces designs that were more attractive to, say, 6-year-old versus 12-year-olds? And we created an entire quantitative map of this to create numbers and to see, are there decisions that we can take? Are there insights that we can generate which might inform our designs later? From this, we created personas. Now, these personas were based on, of course, a lot of background research that we got. Kids that, from 9 to 12, they are exposed to, technology. They already have been using a lot of different gadgets. How could that inform us? Again, very descriptive and more detailed versus, 5 to 8. How do they respond? Their motor skills are still getting formed. It involves very specific functions and specific muscles that they're using, but they're still very, very young. So how do we outline that and put them into these buckets that might help us address our user flows that we're going to create later? So these were 4 different kinds, and we looked at boy versus girl and sort of thought how that aesthetic and the language changes with regards to what they would want to achieve in a watch versus their parents, right? So exactly what were the opportunities? What did the parents want, right? We can't always understand and take a decision on the user. So the differentiation between the user and the buyer comes here. When you create something, you're creating the usability is for the user. That means the app needs to be fully functional to use for the kids, but the features need to also pertain to the buyer. That means I will look at features and give priority here when the parents come in, because there are certain expectations that they would have from a watch for their kid that they intend to buy versus what the kids would actually end up using. And this is where we looked at both of those specific personas in those specific buckets. We then went on to do feature mapping, which was a very super interesting process where we outline what are the features that the competitors have versus what are the features that we can derive from these personas that we might think that might work, right? An example of that, just to say, is the fact that once we were talking to the parents, they said that the kids go out and they forget that they have to come back home. They've gone out to play for an hour and it's been too long. So can we have something like, we thought internally and we brainstormed the idea of having a, return to home alert, where it tells you that, your time is up and you're supposed to come back. Very small things that might be incremental changes, but that really help in providing with a really seamless and a better experience. We also looked at innovative ideas. What was something completely different that we can do? Could we have mood detection? Could we have social community features? And then, of course, visual UI based. What are certain decisions we can take on the UI front that might really set this watch apart from the rest? Based on this, we then outlined these categories. So this is called affinity mapping, where once you outline all of these features, you put them into buckets. That means certain features come across as more on the time management front, whereas certain would be more community driven. Some of them are in the habit formation, whereas some of them are more on the lines of, say, safety. And once we outline these overall buckets, we created an entire map of how would we market the entire thing. The fact that you're never going to have, like during COVID times, you have a sidekick that never leaves you alone. So when you have reminders, you have, these really nice animations and interactions that you can interact with. The fact that we wanted to incorporate an entire holistic health module, that it's not just about going to play and tracking your calories, but it's more than that. It's about your health. It's about meditation. It's about a holistic approach to it. Can we have something like time management, where we wanted to have kids take more charge of their own time? right? So they have their own timetable that they adhere to. You have reminders for that so that you learn how to manage your time better. And all of that created an entire map of how we were going to position this brand and how we were going to sell it to the users and what would really make it stand apart from the rest. Post that, we created the user flows, which I'm just going to show you. Right. So these user flows were then outlined and defined in a way that now that I know that these are certain features that I want to have, and we validated that with the parents, we validated that through another round of user research. It was an iterative process. But through that, what would be the flow? Right. So starting from the default state, when I'm starting, where do I land up? Where do I start seeing the health module? Where am I bringing in the discovery state? What all is going to be there in the discovery state? Post that, the health behavior analysis, your execution state, your activity results, and your default state again. So these sections were sort of outlined so that we start getting an entire sitemap of what this can look like. And again, this was open to iteration. We can go front and back. You decide that on the left swipe, am I going to have my music, or am I going to have something like a health calculator? All of these decisions you can verify once you put that on paper and decide what would be the flow like, to see if there are any breakpoints, any points of inconsistencies, anything that doesn't work that well or breaks the flow. And once you do that, you almost have a very, I would say, a first draft to how your entire product can look like. We outlined that for the control music center. We outlined, when we were saying that we want to create habits versus routine. What is the difference between a habit and what is a routine? How can we make that distinction in the app itself? And how can we make sure that the kids right now do all of these tasks by providing certain incentives after each of them? All of this was outlined, and then we created an entire information architecture for it. So this is where you have the first view of exactly what your smartwatch or the flow is going to look like. And it really brings things into perspective, because now now you've got a very rough sketch. Now you could at this point go and do guerrilla testing, where you could say, I'm going to create like rough structures. I'm going to ask them to like go left and right and try it out and see how users respond to it. Post that, of course, we create the final IAM and the wireframe and all of that. I'm not going to get into it. If we have the time, of course, we can go back and I can maybe show you what we created for noise. That we just see. I have.
No, I think let's wrap up your presentation first, and then we can.
Yeah, we'll see if we have time and we can do that.
Yeah.
All right. I think that is about it. So I think we can, Nisha, up to you. However you want to proceed, we can start with question and answer now if there are any.
Whatever's convenient, you want the Q&A. Please, everyone, feel free to use the chat box to mention your questions, if any. And thanks, Antara. I think it was so informative. I personally also learned so many things. Thank you so much for walking us through.
Great. I hope it wasn't too much.
No, it wasn't, honestly. And that's exactly what I was telling, like even during the conversation, the way that you started with practical examples, the first meme itself, the image itself got us through the entire discussion. And then, of course, like, your discussion about qualitative, quantitative, and bringing us through all the aspects. I think it was genuinely very informative. Any questions, please, everyone, feel free to use the Q&A section. We have a question. Yes, the recordings will be uploaded on the Masters Union YouTube platform. So you don't have to worry about that. The recordings will be available.
While people are bringing in their questions, I think, and I especially love the fact that, you've pointed out some of these more basic things that we miss. For example, in in noise specifically, like the habit versus routine thing, that was something that came up for us during ITC as well, because that was also for children, if you remember. Like we had an initial conversation for ITC. And I mean, I wish I had that point back when I was doing it for ITC, and that is, again, it comes down to like not having enough time for that research during the initial phases for us. But like for noise, we did. And the, difference is night and day in that regard. I think we have a bunch of questions now.
Oh, quite a few.
Can we use Figma application to present our work? Yes, that is what Antara was doing right now. You have a very handy prototype feature in Figma. And, even for that matter, the frames that you create, Figma has a preset for presentations specifically in 16 by 9, and there's one more I don't recall right now, but you can make it in a presentation format and present it using the prototype one.
So the second one is how you're confused on how should I proceed if there are no competitors available at all. I think that's a great question. Not always will you find competitors, and especially if there are no competitors, how do you proceed? So I think the first step here would be to outline exactly what are the requirements from your project, right? So the research can actually start from the users itself. If there is no competition, just directly go to the users and speak to them about, can you maybe outline what the project is about? And we can discuss that, of course, more in detail. But the idea here is if there is no market research, there is definitely always research because your users always exist, right? So go ahead and do that.
Yeah. And if I can just add to that point, Siddhi, it's, there's competitive analysis, which Antara was showing you. There is comparative analysis, which is almost like competitive analysis in that, it takes your closest competitors, even if you don't have any direct competitors, you have anything indirect. And then there's analogous experiences which is basically like, it could be a product that solves for a similar problem, but like as a different solution. For example, if we are looking for if you're looking to build a travel app, and say you live in a world where there are no travel apps, right? The question of how do you build an itinerary, or how do you build something for a user who is on the move. If you're not able to solve that with your closest competitors, you look at something like a Nike Run Club, which helps you build out a path, or build out an on-the-move solution, right? So that counts for an analogous experience. So there is always some form of research. And like Antara said, there is always some market somewhere that has solved for at least a part of the problem, if not all of the problem, right? Now, Antara, Dev is asking, how long does the research phase take in a particular project? You and every other client we've ever had has asked us that. So thank you.
Some research is better than no research. Ideally, I would say for any redesign, you should take a minimum of 2 weeks of research, right? Like just have 2 weeks to look at what the competitors are doing, to look at what is happening around you. You need to also do your own research apart from the fact that you need to go and talk to the users. So ideally, it should be a minimum of 2. Maximum, I would say, no research is like less. You can go up to a month of research, if at all. But I think, Venky, we all know clients don't have that much more time.
What we do here at Onething now is we dedicate a third of the time of the project timeline to research. So if it's say a 3 months project, we try and do at least 1 month of research, or at least 3 weeks of research. Which involves also, of course, building out the information architecture towards the end of it. So about 30% would be a good measure, I think. Otherwise, if you listen to Mr. Albert Einstein, he says that if I had 1 hour to chop a tree, I would spend 58 minutes sharpening my axe. So, in an ideal world, we'd get about 90% of the time, but we take about 30% over here. Akshay says, final screens of the noise project. Akshay, unfortunately, we cannot show you that, but you can go to their Instagram, and they have put up Antara and team's work over there. They've been nice enough to do that, and looks great. Antara, please, you can add over here.
Yeah, I think it's live, guys. So they just launched with the product. It's called Champ 2. You can have a look at it, purchase it. And then see. But I think if we do have time towards the end of the session, maybe 5 minutes, I can show you guys a few screens of it.
Yeah, I'm not entirely certain.
Okay.
I had a word with the projects team.
So then, sorry, I apologize.
Yeah, since we're recording, otherwise. But like Antara said, it is live. You can, now I think the Champ 2 app is also live, right? Like what you guys made.
Yeah, no, not the app, just the watch.
Just the watch, yeah. But you guys can check it out, online. Unfortunately, we can't show you.
We are also launching with our new website on Onething. So in another 20 days, I think you should be able to see this.
Oh yeah, that's true. That's true. We do. Yeah. In about 20 days, yeah, you'll be able to see it on our website. That's right. Right. Hi, is Figma alone enough to become a UX UI designer? No. No tool alone can help you become thing. Like, if I hold a hammer, I don't become a mechanic. You know what I mean? So it's all about the crafting your skill, sort of always being open to learning more, and being very curious. That's the one thing you need for becoming a designer, is curiosity and definitely an intent to learn. Antara, you can add on to that. I think you know this answer better than I do.
No, you're absolutely right. I think it's not enough. It's just a tool, right? So you could do that on Sketch, you could do it on InVision, you could do whatever. But the idea is every UX and UI designer should know how to think critically, should know how to research, and should know how to iterate. These are three very important skills to sort of hone. Because eventually, what you're trying to do is you're going to solve a problem. But can you even think of the multiple ways that you can solve the problem? Creating comes later. You can you can hone your skills, you can become a better UI designer, you can become a better UX designer, but if you can't think critically, it's going to be a problem. So I think that would be the number one skill to focus on, and do as many like case studies, pick up hypothetical projects, and that's what really helps.
Go out into the real world and just look at all the things that are wrong and think about how you can make them right. Okay, I'm gonna press this button and see if that shows up. Yes. Is it essential for a UI UX designer to know basic code at the least? If you ask our director of design, he'll say yes to that immediately. And to a certain degree, I think it is important. Even Antara, in fact, for one of our projects, learned quite a bit of code as well for the university quiz that she showed you. Antara, why don't you talk them through why you had to pick that up?
So see, it's not. I would say it helps. We were discussing internally. UX and UI is a combination of a lot of different things. So you need to, if you know a little bit about marketing, it helps. If you know a little bit about code, it helps. Ideally, as designers, we eventually got to hand over our work to the developers. If we ourselves don't know if it's possible in code, it's just going to make the entire process much more complicated. And if you do know how to code a little bit, and I'm talking about just like basic HTML and CSS, you don't even have to go into JavaScript and all of that. But an understanding of that helps you definitely become a better designer. So, the idea is that one designer says that I've created this amazing carousel and it sort of comes on top and then it like bleeds out of another page and all of that. And then you realize I cannot develop it at all. So you will be able to give solutions that are possible. So it's good to know your constraints and it's good to know the entire domain and not just creating stuff and then talking to the developer and saying it's possible.
This is a nice one, Joshua. Is the watch waterproof, Antara?
No, this watch, let me tell you, Joshua, you've hit a nerve right now because this watch is for 2,000 rupees only. That means that it does not have a lot of features at all. And, so they're going to be launching another high-end model. But for this, they were restricted in terms of the functionality. So it couldn't really be made completely waterproof.
Satvik has an interesting question, and this is, I think, something close to your heart, Antara. How do you avoid bias during the whole process?
See, when you start as a designer, you always feel like you know best, like you know what needs to be done. And you think that you are the user. Because you could be a user, you have insane amounts of empathy, you can put yourself in their shoes and you can actually think of a problem and a solution for them. But the idea is to separate yourself completely. If you start with the facts, there is no space for bias. Of course, there is going to be bias when it comes to, how does this look like? Should I am more inclined towards say a lighter palette versus a completely bright stark palette. But then I take myself out of the equation. I actually go to the users, test it out and see if it works or not, and then create something. I think a very good example for that, Venky, is local. And you can talk about that because that's where we had our aesthetic had to just take a back foot.
Yeah, and absolutely. And we do have a seminar surrounding that about designing for India and designing for the next billion users. But yeah, you're absolutely right. So a lot of our biases came to the forefront when we were designing for local. So local is a news and classifieds app for tier 2, tier 3 cities. And, our assumption was that, tier 2, tier 3 cities, how tech savvy can you be? But it turns out quite a lot more than you think, So yeah, a lot of the biases, you will always go in with biases. You will always go into the assumptions. It's important to validate or invalidate them. If you are going with an assumption that is, inherently that comes in from a bias, and if you validate that assumption, then you can design it. If that assumption remains invalidated, then you can't use it, and then that means your bias was a bigger part of the assumption than the design solution that you're going to create. So definitely, yeah, like that, basically. Just go in and figure it out, talk to people, and you'll know the rest. Siddhi says it's like creating a chat experience for a luxury hotel. Not sure what the question is, Siddhi, but
I
thank you.
think this is more in relation to the last one that she asked. So I think you're asking about you're the one that asked about competitors, if I'm right? So I think what we should do here is look at other chat experiences. Forget luxury, forget the sector altogether. Go all out. So a lot of times, say even right now when we are designing something, it's for I don't know if I can say the name of the brand. It's a bike company.
Oh yeah, we don't say that name out loud right now.
Oh, okay, sorry. It's too many NDA, guys. It's very hard to have a conversation and not bring up.
Like a studio life for you guys.
I want to name drop like that, but I can't. So
Yeah.
so the thing is that we will, of course, you can look at other bike companies to get an idea of the entire booking flow, but then you can also look at something completely different, like a Magic Bricks, for that matter, or an OLX. So that gives you a lot of understanding of what the flow is like, and there are multiple chat experience platforms that you can have a look at.
Yeah, and just to jump off of that, see, when you say chat experience for a luxury hotel, therein lies your problem statement, right? So you have to break that down. So what does it mean to have a chat experience, right? So you break it down into, is it for chatting or is it for solutioning, right? When you say luxury, is it more Balmain luxury or is it more like bridge luxury like diesel, right? So you look at aesthetics from there. And when you say hotel, luxury hotel, then it's hospitality. So then you look at analogous experiences for hospitality, where are you trying to emulate someone talking to the front desk through that chat experience? Or are you trying to emulate someone talking to, say, Zomato help when they're looking at that chat experience? So you break it down. You break it down into the parts that exist. And, and then you look at analogous experiences that exist within that. And of course, chat experiences already exist, like Antara said, like you have chatbots, you have, actual chat platforms. Look through those, see how they work, and try and emulate to the closest the way that they're solutioning it, right? Moving on from there, can we get any sample portfolio reference Figma file to learn the work of a UX designer will be? So I'm assuming you're asking for like a sample portfolio in terms of like how do we write out the problem statement and expand on that. So I would say you could actually just go online on Medium or whatever, or even Figma community for that matter. You will have a bunch of sample portfolio references. But more than that, to see the work of a UX designer, you do it pretty much every day when you use your phone or when you use the internet, right? If you're on a website, you're on an app. And if it's like one of the new age products, it's definitely by a UX designer. So go in and look at the different things that they've done to make your lives easier through that product. Antara?
How to get into Onething Design as a junior designer? Any tips? Yes, like I said, first and foremost, be able to think and sort of try and find solutions. Don't always create the most good looking stuff. We've always been taught that in college. I also did that. I just wanted to create pretty applications that just look stunning. And as a UX designer, it's more than that. You got to think about, the entire flow. Of course, you can go online and apply. Our entire process is, if your portfolio goes through, then we have one round of interview. There's an assignment, and post that, of course, a final call. So if you have a decent case study where you've thought about what the problem statement is, try to flesh out through research and come up with a solution, that is good enough. Quality and not quantity.
That's a good one, Antara. Thank you. How do you track the metrics of your research? Well, you literally what Antara told you about, like how you just write down everything, right? If you're talking about metrics post creating the product, there's a bunch of, different tools like Google Analytics, Hotjar, things like that, where you can just, plug it into your backend systems and watch the numbers sort of tick. But if you're talking about like during the research side of things, the kind of metrics that at the end of the research phase that you get, those are more abstract. They're not hard numbers, but you can make them work for you. For example, if you're doing user interviews, once you've like done like 7 to 10 people, you can sort of tell what are the things that the users really want based on the kind of answers that are repeating, based on the kind of problems that are repeating, more importantly, right? So you know what to solution for based on those. So yeah, so pre-building the product, it's a little more abstract, but post-building the product, you have hard data.
Yeah, just to add to that, there are a lot of other platforms also now. So say Google Analytics, right? You can look at the data that you already have. Say you know that you've got a drop off of say 40%, right? And you can take a decision at the beginning. Of course, these are not hard numbers. You cannot always define all of this in like, I'm going to take it down to like 5%. But you can see if the product is performing better. That means your drop off has reduced. So you can set a few KPIs in mind. Ideally, we don't always do that because it is dependent on multiple factors. But if you do want to track very specific metrics of say if some particular flow is working or not, you should look at those. So you can look at stickiness, and you can look at the increased user group, and all of those. And there are multiple metrics to track it. You can choose the ones that you want to track, work towards it, try and solve the problem, and then come back and see if actually that's been affected or not.
Perfect. Yeah. Anonymous attendee says, how to start a case study from scratch for a beginner. Antara, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, of course. So I think you guys shouldn't feel stressed about starting something. It's the most exciting part of the entire project. The fact that you have a problem and you can solve it any way which you want. And it seems a little intimidating in the beginning, but start from something that you genuinely like. So suppose you have been using a lot of food delivery apps, right? You understand that. There's a little bit of research that you already have through that by using Zomato and Swiggy and 100 others. So start with something that you feel close to and maybe you want to solve. There are a lot of different, Venky, what's the name of this one platform where you can actually get a problem statement?
OpenIDEO.
OpenIDEO, yes. So try out OpenIDEO, guys. What they do is that they give you a problem statement. Sometimes if you're a little stuck and you want to think about, I want to try something completely different, use that and you can, start from there. And start with, there is a clear process. You start definitely by outlining the statement, you do your research, you move to your information architecture, you lay out the entire sitemap, you create wireframes, you then look at visual direction, how does it look and feel like, you then create the UI screens and the interactions that comes after.
Yeah, absolutely. And
I hadn't went so far, it just came out of the way. Sorry.
No, so I mean, that's an excellent point actually, and I'd take you one step back, in fact, and tell you that look for a real world problem to solve. Like just look for something that you think requires a solution. Like for example, there are already apps that exist. You can look to look at how to make them better, for example, or how to redesign them, or like restructure their problem statement. Like if there is an app for music, is it solving all of the problems someone who's trying to discover music is solving? Things like that. You start with the problem statement and you take it from there, right? All right, this is good. If I know all in Figma to creating a creative app or website, can I get a job as a UX UI designer? Unfortunately, no, because again, you can know how to use a hammer, but you cannot be a mechanic. You need to know more than just the tool. You need to know how to be empathetic. For a designer, that's the number one thing. Like you have to be empathetic to understand the problems that the user is facing, right? Then you need to know how to do research, right? You need to know how the problem statement can be broken down into its individual parts, and how those parts can actually dig deep into those parts and see what problems lie therein, and then build it back up. So there's a whole step-by-step process of becoming a designer. Starts with understanding users, starts with being empathetic to users, goes on to you are like Antara said, you are more than just a designer. You are a researcher, you're a sales guy, you're a developer. It's a whole bunch of things, right? But not too overwhelming, because you have to start somewhere. I wouldn't recommend starting at the tool. I would recommend starting at a skill. So you can pick up research as a skill that you want to start at, become better at that. You can pick up, say, wireframing. Someone has done the research for you, and you pick up that research and you know how to make it into a wireframe, right? Something like that, right? So pick up one section of it, sort of hone your skill there, and then learn everything else there is to learn through your years, right? Like we've spent collectively so many years as designers. I know for a fact we are not yet fully developed as designers, even though I'm a design manager, she's a design lead, and collectively, I think we have about 10, 12 years about 15 years of experience, I think, at this point. And, we haven't reached our best yet, I think. Andhra, any thoughts to that?
I'm good. I'm sorry, I'm just kidding. All right. The next question is for noise.
How do we proceed if there is a disparity between user and buyer's needs, like in case study of noise? Okay, that is kids and parents. Excellent question. Go ahead, Andhra.
All right. So, like I discussed, there is a difference between user and a buyer. A buyer you would prioritize in terms of two things: in operation, how the app or the product functions, how it performs, how do you use it on a day-to-day basis. All the operational stuff and the functionality, I would say, prioritize towards the user. Whereas the buyer is more on the overarching goals. So it's how you market the product. What features are you going to have in the product? And of course, there are times where these clashes happen, but you always have to zoom out and say that I need to make it usable for the user, but I need to cater to the goals and the objectives of the buyer. And that is how I think you might be able to narrow down. And once the data comes in, you will see there are a lot of overlaps. There won't be such stark situations because at the end of the day, these are interconnected. And it's like a Venn diagram of sorts.
Excellent answer, man. For UX designers, like you use Figma, but is it better to use Adobe XD or to go with Figma? I would say pick whatever you think is easiest. We use Figma because of, we get to collaborate on Figma. It's an online tool, so there can be like 5 designers working on one file, and you can talk to each other through Figma's, audio chat. And while you're designing, somebody else can see what you're doing and things like that. So it helps. Plus Figma's community feature is amazing because you get to see so many different types of design, so many different types of designers. You get so much information from there. So it's great as a tool. But Adobe XD, of course, works the same way, more or less, in terms of the design. Figma is just better at what it does, but you can use either or. It doesn't, it won't make a difference.
We're biased towards Figma because
we are biased towards Figma. Honestly, like they should be paying us about it, considering the amount of times we talk about Figma to other people. Right. Hi, ma'am. I'm Teja. How to improve ideology and newly invention in Figma without any Google suggest. I think what Teja is trying to ask you is, how do you improve without trying to become a Google designer like we have Google developers? Just Googling your results, how I'm assuming that's the idea here.
So I think one of the most important things, and I think Venky is a great person to learn from, is the fact that read. And he's excellent. Like he'll have answers to any questions only because he reads so much. So the first thing I would do to improve anywhere, in any field, in any domain, is to read and get that exposure, right? So you have to be able to invent something, you need to know what is happening right now. And only then can you think beyond what is supposed to happen. So you need to know the best practices, you need to know the cutting edge technology, you need to know what could possibly happen in the future, and that's where you truly discover something new. One of the things which I showed in the noise case study was that we looked at the competitors first. Then we outlined what features we could get from competition. And then there's an innovative idea section where nobody does that, but we just got these ideas sometimes by looking around so much that it just sparked something in our heads and we noted that down. Or it could be through cross-referencing. So if suppose I'm creating a news platform, but I look at a trading application, I know instantly that I can create a news platform. I'm giving a random example, but I can create a news platform with the entire look and feel of the trading thing. So it looks like it's very different. None of the other current news platforms do that. So when you cross-reference things that supposedly are not supposed to fit, and when you fit them, that's when you get all of these inventive new ideas.
Yeah. Siddhi is asking, ma'am, sir, can I get connected to you? Do you give feedback? Yeah, for a living, but you can also just connect with us on LinkedIn or something.
Yeah.
We'll be more than happy to answer your questions. Or, you could join this course and we'll always be answering your questions for the next 6 months.
I'm hoping to I can't see any of you guys, but to meet some of you guys.
Yeah, we hope you guys join up, all of that. But I think Nirja is back on because we are out of time. Is that right, Nirja?
No, I think we are fully enjoying the conversation and the way that all of you, particularly I think Antara has patiently dissected all the answers and you've given like a sort of a proper supplement important idea to all the questions. I think it was absolutely relevant. Just in the interest of time, however, if there's any question that is pending and you'd like to take it.
I did see one that I think we should answer. They just don't stop coming. I love how interested you guys are in this, yeah. I hope it converts to you
One
guys.
is asking for a referral.
How to set up the right research objectives and questions and how to make sure. No, that's the first one.
I want to answer one.
The tips for interview one. Is that the one you were looking at as well?
I was going to answer how to become better at taking design critique.
Oh yeah, go ahead. Oh, that's the one. That's the last one we'll answer because that's a good answer. Go ahead, Antara.
So I'm going to be writing a blog about it, guys. Soon. You can read it, and of course, it's entirely about how to become better at design critique. But one of the most important things is to set your expectations and to outline the objective before sort of getting into it. Sometimes we get into a design critique and clients say just doesn't work. And there is no outcome. There is no direction. So the most important thing in a design critique, when you take it, is to set the direction and the context. Once you outline what do I want to achieve out of this critique and where do I want it to end, what is the scope of the entire critique, you will be able to take it better. And of course, your own understanding and your own expertise. You got to be a good designer to be able to do better critiques, right? Like you have to hone your skill. So the better you are, the better you are at critiquing others.
Excellent point, Antara. I think that's it from us, Nirja. I think let us know.
Absolutely. There is going to be another masterclass next week where Venky is again going to be there. So please feel free to join us if any of your doubts were probably not answered here. Please feel free to take a look at the MasterCamp that we are having, where both Antara as well as Venky, they're going to be masters largely. Please feel free to take a look at the MasterCamp User Experience and Design, which is co-designed and delivered by Onething Design Studios. And thanks a ton. Just before we wrap up, any last minute comments, Antara, Venky, any last minute comments before we kickstart our weekend?
No, just have a good weekend, I guess, and keep looking out for problems to solve.
Yeah, absolutely. This was great, guys, and thank you for participating so well. I wish we could answer all of your questions, but Venky is going to be there on the next call, so you can start asking them right away at the beginning. That might help.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.